Hello everybody, how's things? Yeah, so just finishing up for the night. I'm probably not going to need this, but yeah, yeah, been thinking about making this video for a while, but it's just a case of just how to frame it without going off too much at a tangent. Have you seen the new Indiana Jones film yet? Dial of Destiny. Well, I mean, the thing is that, like, there seems to be this thing about as soon as a new blockbuster film comes out, say like Indiana Jones or one of the Star Wars films comes out, there's like whole channels devoted to telling you how rubbish it is and don't bother going to see it, and it's all woke, and rather than just making your own mind up, rather than like is it a bad film because it's woke, or is it a bad film because it's a bad film, or is it a good film, or and then of course there's other things, I'm a bit of a Star Trek, Doctor Who fan, and you get people saying like listing the best of the Star Trek films, saying that the first one and the third one and the fifth one are not very good, but my personal favourite is the first one, with some of the special editions they've done, because all the metaphysics in that and everything, about humanity's place in the universe, and and this constant need to improve yourself and all that lot. So I like to wander off a little bit, but anyway, so I've seen some of these videos, about how this sort of Indiana Jones 5 is like terrible. So I thought, well, I need to make my own mind up about that. So so Thursday, I had an early finish at work, which is nice. Decided to go and see it. Because I missed the 8:10. There was an 8:10 showing, and then there was one at like I think 10 to 9. So I missed the 8:10 showing, but I got the 10 to 9, and it was one of the, it's like it's one of those. We went to the Odeon. The Odeon. It's not that far from here, but I was the only person in the room. I had this whole sort of room, nice comfy chairs and everything, and the sound, So I was in this room by myself, and of course, it's quite pricey going to the cinema these days. It's £18.50 for the ticket, and you think, well, like you could wait for the box set to come out. It might cost you less than that, or you can find it. It might be streamed on the Disney Channel or Netflix or where. I don't know. It wouldn't be able to stream on Netflix, but I think you know what I mean. So even just like the fact of going to the movies these days. You got to try and drag people out, because like you're also, not only are you competing against these streaming channels, but people have got these big televisions and like these surround sound systems. You don't need to go out, like the old days of when going to the movies, it was a big event, where there'd be like there'd be a film. Well, I mean, this is like what my mum and dad used to tell me, because they stopped doing this ages ago. But especially in England, there used to be like there'd be like some sort of what they called like the B movie, and then there'd be like the newsreel, and then there'd be like an interval, and then a guy would come out on this on like a trapdoor thing. He'd come out and he'd play the organ. He'd play like the theatre organ, while people are buying ice creams and orange juice and stuff like that. And then you get the main film, and then you go home, and it was it was quite affordable as well, that seems to be like a bygone age, So there's that part of it, that we don't have that anymore. So it's sort of like, well, how do you get people to go? And then of course you're thinking, well, maybe it's better, maybe more people will go and see like a big franchise than say like a an art house film, even say like a film like The Menu, which is like it's a sort of very art house type film, very good, but I don't know whether that many people would go and see it, or a Richard Curtis film, people might go and see that, because some of the Richard Curtis films from the past, people have gone to see those. So he said, oh yeah, I'll go and see the new Richard Curtis film. Yeah, right. But bringing it back on point, like, oh, Indiana Jones. Oh, there's a new Indiana Jones film going. Shall we go and see it? Well, in theory, you'd think because like the previous ones had done so well, that this one would do as well as, as they would. Of course, times have changed, and then you find out that they've spent like, was it $300 million on it? Like a ridiculous amount of money. But as I was saying, when I went there, in the past, when like these big films have come out, it's the people have been like queuing up to see these things. They've been running them in like multiple theatres. Like in the same complex. Multiple rooms. But of course, they're mostly empty. So even before you get to the point of whether it's a good film or a bad film, this thing's got to make its money back. And then of course it's expensive, like heating and lighting, and you've got to pay your staff. So it's, it's like I was saying, it cost me £18.50 for that ticket, and that was just like a standard seat. It wasn't a deluxe seat. So so there's all that to factor in. Anyway, you actually get into the film itself. The mild spoilers ahead, so I don't know whether you want to skip this bit or not. But I mean, I really enjoyed it. I'm not ashamed to actually say that either. Like the first, I'm not sure, half hour or so, maybe a bit more. There's a bit of like sort of de-aged Indiana Jones, and it's all set in the during the war. And there's this big chase on the train, and it's got Toby Jones in as well. I mean, and he's in this. It's like a sitcom. It's a British sitcom called Detectorist. It's all about like these two guys who are out with their metal detectors, and so he was, and there's all about archaeology in that as well. So so it's good to see him in it. He was very good in it. And then of course it goes, it's all about this idea of, he learns about this thing called the Dial of Destiny, or the Antikythera theory. But the thing is though, that like, if you actually know your Greek, or you've got some Greek behind you, that word Antikythera, it doesn't actually, it's not about like, it doesn't mean time machine or Dial of Destiny. It translates as from that Greek antikos. It's like, it meaning like old. And Antikythera. So it's sort of more about like sort of old knowledge or old theory or something like that. You could argue that the chi in the middle from that from the word about sort of control, or you could argue something along those lines. So then you've got this idea, that George Orwell idea about controlling the past, or he who controls the past controls the future, and which is why this whole thing about having these sort of renegade Nazis involved in the plot as well. You can kind of see some of that coming in, but a lot of people wouldn't perhaps pick up on that so much. And of course the idea of getting old, the whole point about and the whole point as well about living in the present, rather than living in the past. That's something very important. This idea that like somehow, that we're living in a, that we've lost some old knowledge, and that itself goes back to those, like the actual original concept for Raiders of the Lost Ark and Star Wars. In fact, where George Lucas was talking about those old RKO Saturday morning pictures, like Zorro, Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, where it'd be like you'd have like that week's episode, and they'd end on a cliffhanger, and and but you know that, but they will put a lot in those stories. You know, a lot of action and a lot of a lot of storytelling. And the idea would be, wouldn't it be great to make one of those old RKO serials, but using modern film technology, and but in the style of, say, David Lean or Alfred Hitchcock or some of these other great directors. You know, wouldn't it be great to go back and say, what would it have been like, if David Lean had made Zorro or Star Wars, no, not Star Wars, like Flash Gordon, that was, yeah. So again, that idea of that somehow there was like a bit like a lost art in cinema. In that case, that sense of adventure and excitement about that was good about when Raiders of the Lost Ark first came out. That was one of the good things about it, because you didn't know what was going to happen next. There were so many twists and turns and that, and so many of those points in the film, where how is Indy going to get out of this one? And of course he does. But then you get, you've been getting, like some of these like people criticising this film on, online and talking, and yet you go back to that, like, and let's see, in the new one, there's this is it Matt Mikkelsen, the guy who played Le Chiffre in Casino Royale. He plays like this sort of renegade, sort of, he's a Nazi, but he ends up working on like the Apollo program, and there's sort of shades of the Ron Lacey, the Toth character, the guy with the poker, and there's sort of shades of him, but he's he's more convincing. He's more like a fanatic. You can kind of see that. Because in the modern film, if they'd done that, the bit where like that Ron Lacey character goes, shoot them both, it's cartoonish, and you wouldn't take it seriously now, so he's had to be a bit more sort of serious. So they've had to change things and bring some things up to date. Anyway, and of course a lot of people are talking about the Phoebe Waller-Bridge, that. Half expecting this film to be sort of Mary Sue Saves the Day, and and you're thinking, oh, I'm not going watching that because it sounds awful. And then it makes you think, well, why would anybody in the right mind sort of bankroll $300 million to go and make Mary Sue Saves the Day? It just doesn't, it just doesn't work. Like, you'd have to be a complete imbecile to do that. They like to. They like put forward a treatment where, it's so contrived like that. I should talk about that more on another day. But from what I was actually seeing, like how they've introduced her is interesting as well, because it's sort of like, Indy's getting older now and he's still lecturing, but because it's sort of set sort of around like the late 60s. It's in that period. For me, it was sort of evoking that film, The Paper Chase. And so Indy is this sort of old, sort of cynical lecturer. And so it was sort of evoking that. And the way they introduced her, she was sort of reminding me a bit of Barbra Streisand's character in that film, What's Up, Doc? Where, she meets Warren Beatty. I don't know if you've seen that film, What's Up, Doc? Warren Beatty plays this old grumpy, well, not old, but he plays this professor who's like sort of, he seems to be trapped in like a bit of a dead end job and a bit of a dead end relationship, and then he meets this Barbra Streisand character just in a shop one day, and she's trying to chat him up, and first of all he's not interested, and it turns out she sort of represents this whole new life for him and whatnot. Well, the Phoebe Waller-Bridge character, this Helena. The name Helena as well, patron saint of New Discovery, so that's interesting. The way they've introduced her is sort of very much of that, a very similar character, but I mean, again, like, without trying to spoil it too much, she starts out like a bit of a baddie, but she's also evoking like the Paul Freeman the Belloc character in Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know, the idea that that Indy and Belloc were friends at one point, but Belloc got more interested in the profit side of archaeology. So Helena's very similar to that, and then of course she sort of changes and whatever. And I didn't think she was that. I didn't think she was that annoying. There were a couple of plot holes which I thought were more annoying. You know, that they have to go off to this place where there's this antique auction going on, and it looked like they got displaced in a few reels from No Time to Die. You know, that bit where there's the party where all the Spectre agents are. It looked like they got some of that. You know, it looked like it had even been shot on the same set. You know, very similar. But then it was back to like a sort of like a car chase, which is but more sort of in vogue with Indiana Jones. You know, those sorts of things. And yeah, but I didn't actually, I didn't think it was sort, it wasn't sort of complete sort of Mary Sue, gosh, you're right, yes, I never thought of that. It wasn't like that at all. You know, there was a bit of tension between the two, like between Indy and Helena, or Wombat, or whatever she's called. And then of course, like the actual, they have to go on this sort of hunts, but to find this part of this dial, and I thought that was very in keeping with, like with some of the other Indiana Jones films, like with Last Crusade, and even in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, so there's lots of these little subtle homages to what had gone before, but like I was saying, this whole thing about having to move with the times and having to move things forward. And a brilliant score by John Williams as well. So why am I putting this on this channel? Well, it's this whole thing now about like moving with the times, and when making films like that. When they're actually, it depends what you're actually looking for in a script. But when you actually start looking at like the critical theory side of things, where like this scene is referencing this film or that film, like I was saying about like bits of like the paper chase coming in, and then there's like even there's the chase in New York, there's bits of like Dirty Harry coming in there, so the idea that that maybe like trying to make that scene in the style of like a Don Siegel film, like sort of car chases and bits of action, in New York. I mean, rather than, alright, obviously Dirty Harry is set in San Francisco, but the idea of doing something similar, to evoke the style of that time, and then of course there's a bit where that Indy is he's old and he's a bit of a grumpy old man, the grumpy old man next door telling you to keep the noise down. And there's bits of Gran Torino coming in there as well, which I thought that was great. So it's things like that. It's referencing. It's that Roland Barthes quote. The whole thing about there's no such thing as a new text. All an author does is just compile and edit what's gone before and bring it into a new form. And I kind of think we've forgotten about that. It's because we're so used to like what the next big thing is, and the next big thing after that, and the next big thing after that, and these things balloon, and they've got these huge budgets, like $300 million. I always feel like $300 million. Well, anyway, because of that, and because of that, the trend to copy what went on last year or like last month, but you kind of like forget like the bigger picture, and so I'm just thinking, like moving forward, like as an artist, sort of musician, wouldn't it be good just to expand the canvas a little bit more? Like look at like sort of modern ideas and then sort of extrapolate back and then say, well, how about we do this, in the style of so, in the terms of music, because primarily this channel has been about music, but say, if I'm writing a prog album, how would it go if, say, Benjamin Britten was producing it, or was helping writing some of the music for it. Or like say you're playing a solo. What would it be like if say Brian May played a solo on this bit, or Jan Hammer played the keyboards, or Eric Clapton did the opening section, or whatever, or we're roping Miroslav Rostropovich, or like, even just a little bit of a tangent, but say like those Miles Davis Bitches Brew sessions, where he was sort of starting to explore sort of jazz rock, funk, fusion type music. What would it have been like, say, if rather than John McLaughlin on guitar, you had Steve Vai on guitar? How would that have worked out? Would it have taken? Would it have gone in a sort of more of a different direction? Or say if Miles was around now, doing a similar project, which musicians would he put in? Who would he be working with? So I'm hoping this is making some kind of a sense. I think I also, just kind of to summarise, that's just, I went to the cinema, but it's very hard. It's very difficult to get people to go out there now. Why is that? Well, because things have moved on. The technology's moved on. It's not there anymore. So that means, say, if I was to make a record, no matter how good or well produced that record is, at the moment, I can't say that there would be a sustainable market for that record. Maybe I could do like a live show, but again, I'd have to ensure that enough people were going to come out to want to see it, for that to be a worthwhile venture. So there's that side, so that's sort of inspired things as well. There also seems to be this thing about, loads of like YouTube channels, just being cynical, but just complaining about stuff because that gets the hits, just to say how that something's rubbish, just for the sake of it, because you get more hits that way, you get more views that way, without making your own mind up. So then again, there's that, learning to make your own mind up, learning to be a bit more open-minded about things that we like, like that video I was doing recently about with talking about Gary Moore, and I was saying, well, is it good, or is it good because people are told it's good, or is it bad because people are told it's bad and you shouldn't watch it, or saying that like Star Trek 3 is like one of the worst films, but it's probably one of the original films that I've seen the most, and I remember joking with one of my ex-girlfriends about there's a bit with like the Klingon dog, like Christopher Lloyd plays the Klingon commander, and he's got this sort of reptile dog, and I was saying, it looks a bit like your dog, and she was laughing about that, but it's things like that. Sometimes you watch those films for the cheese factor of them, the fact, and again, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, that all it was just an attempt to just try and like do something like Zorro or King Solomon's Mines or Flash Gordon, but brought up to date. That we're not talking serious sort of art house auteur cinema, although you could expect some of that in those films as well. You kind of just expect you go in there just to be entertained for a couple of hours, So I'm hoping that's making some sense. That if you're being creative, you got to try and move with the times. You can't just rely on what's gone before, because that won't necessarily bring the money in. And you also got to start thinking critically about sort of, if you are creating something. Don't be attached just to like one particular idea. Try and think about lots of ideas and bringing those together, or like in terms of like, say, certain themes. Trying to bring those together, and make them a cohesive whole, and stuff like that. Anyway, I'm hoping this made some sense. It's slightly different than the usual videos I've done on here, but yeah, please comment below, and yeah, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.